Plot is the hardest of the 4 story pillars to write in my opinion. I'm also beginning to think that its effect on quality is overshadowed by characters and themes. Nevertheless, I wanted to list out the ways a plot can be enhanced. For example, characters can be enhanced by including a lot of character arcs, backstories, characterization, and more. With the elements of a plot, you can't always just increase the quantity or quality. You can't just increase the amount of conflicts, inciting incidents, stakes, and climaxes, and the story structure has a cap on quality, but there are elements that can be improved to make the plot more professional. The first is payoff. In simple terms, a setup is an unresolved idea, and a payoff is the resolving of that idea. If there is a gun on the wall that has never been used in the story, the gun's purpose hasn't been resolved. When the gun is fired, its purpose has been resolved. Payoffs are very important in stories, so packing a plot with a bunch of them, making every scene an idea that will be resolved in the future, is a great way to strengthen a plot. Then there's something I'll call discovered payoffs or retroactive payoffs. The reason I specify discovering is because the setup may not have initially been a setup when it was written. There are times where a moment is obviously being set up to be paid off in a future scene. It's so clear that you can predict what the payoff will be. But as a writer, you can also look back at your story and decide to expand upon previous events that weren't exactly unresolved, turning said event into a setup for your future payoff. I can use JJK as an example. At the start of season 2, Toji died before ever meeting his son, Megumi. On its own, that doesn't look like an unresolved idea, because he didn't care about his son. I don't think anyone could predict that Toji would have been revived to meet and fight Megumi in the next arc, but it happened. It didn't have to happen, because the family members not meeting wasn't a clear setup, but it happening retroactively turned that into a setup. Maki fighting Toji could have also been a discovered payoff if it had happened. Both of them having heavenly restriction and being from the same clan, but never fighting, doesn't feel like an unresolved idea, but if the fight did happen, it would have been a great payoff. Find things in your story that you can expand upon. It could be events, characters, items, etc. Another technique is mirroring, which is when the story repeats events or themes to compare and contrast them to a previous time. Examples are Luke and Vader cutting each other's hands off, and Yuji and Mahito making each other feel great despair. This is similar to the retroactive payoff. When you see the first scene, it doesn't feel like an unresolved idea, but when you see the second, you realize that the original scene had become a setup for this payoff. A story arc example is Soul Society vs. Waco Mundo. They have very similar structures, but very different meanings. Plot twists are the next best thing to enhance a plot. A plot twist is an unexpected change in the story built on misdirection. The story makes you think one thing, but then suddenly reveals that what you thought was wrong. For example, this can be the direction of a plot or the identity of a character. Keeping the story unpredictable is an easy way to engage the audience and keep them on their toes. Plot twists don't necessarily have to be foreshadowed, but they ideally shouldn't contradict previous events or shatter the audience's suspension of disbelief. This can also become tiring and worn out if used too much. Payoffs never get tiring though. Symbolism is when a literal thing represents another thing in a non-literal way. You can make symbols more detailed by having the symbol go through developments to reflect the idea that it's symbolic of. A good example is Sasuke's headband. It represents his connection to Konoha and Naruto. When he fights Naruto on the rooftop, he leaves it off. When he fights Naruto again, it has a scar put on it, showing a severed bond. He leaves it behind and doesn't wear it for a majority of part 2, reflecting his lack of connection to Naruto. At the end of the story, when he reconciles with Naruto and Konoha, Naruto returns his headband and he accepts it. Another example is what I call synthesis. This is when elements of different story pillars are linked together. For example, a character completing their arc and being rewarded with a new ability. In the story, the arc and the ability aren't related, but from the writer's perspective, they got that power because they completed their arc. Another common example is a character having a physical and thematic fight and winning both at the same time. Technically, they could have won the physical fight and lost the thematic one, but the author tied them together with an invisible thread. Symbolism can't be overdone. The last thing I have is subplots, which are secondary plots. They can be based on goals or characters. For example, one character could have multiple goals and switch between which one they're working on. Each goal could be its own subplot, but the main type is one based on a character, where they're either pursuing a goal or completing a character arc. Subplots can be hard to manage in abundance. Ideally, all subplots should actually enhance the main plot rather than being distractions. The most common example is the main plot focusing on the main conflict while the subplot focuses on character development and romance. A downside is that including too many can slow down the pacing of the story, especially if you don't plan out the timings of the payoffs. The branching plot is a great way to write subplots. This is when the characters split up to accomplish separate mini-goals for the greater goal. This adds complexity to the plot. It's especially powerful when the timeline matters. For example, one event happening in branch A at a specific time having a significant impact on branch B at that same time. The third act of Chimera Ant is a good example. In conclusion, a high mastery of payoffs, plot twists, symbolism, and subplots can be used to enhance the quality of a plot.